As a student currently passing through the higher education system, I can often feel like a specimen placed on exhibit at the zoo. There's this sense of entitlement held by the general public around the idea that they get to hold court on matters they have demonstrated time and time again a complete lack of understanding. Take, for example, the recent outcry over no platforming, an ancient practice that is the very reason universities exist in the first place, which has become equated to a violation of human rights. I speak, of course, about the garbage claim that this is the desecration of freedom of speech and expression on campuses in both the UK and the US. But to understand why this is a woefully inadequate synopsis of the current situation, allow me to run an analogy past you. Two of my friends, Car and Diff, set out to create their own YouTube channel which hosts educational content. Over time, their channel grows in notoriety until they become the very embodiment of educational channels across YouTube, hosting regular content created both by Car and by Diff internally, but also by numerous guest creators sourced externally. These external content creators submit ideas for their videos and many get through. However, a few do not. For some reason, whether it is the content is observably wrong, promotes violence or intolerance towards a specific demographic, or is even right yet for all of the wrong reasons, or a combination of all three, some content is rejected. One of the people rejected takes insult to this and claims that their freedom of speech has in fact been violated. Of course, this is not true. Nobody has attempted to stop the individual from having their freedom of speech. Rather simply, both Car and Diff just have no interest in using their resources they have gathered from providing educational material towards promoting ignorance and intolerance. This is no platforming, refusing to give someone a platform you control and the associated resources of time, space, and equipment. Now, if down to human error, Car had approved some content and uploaded it, only for Diff to view it and then realize a massive oversight on part of Car, leading to Diff to protest the content's existence on their channel, ultimately leading to the removal of said content, that is still not the silencing of free speech. People make mistakes all the time, and unless they have a contracted agreement, they are in no way obligated to continue to share their resources and time and audience with a third party. This is the very same for universities and is in fact the entire base of them. A university moderates the academic vigor of its educational content to ensure high standards. The better the moderation, the better the standards, the better the university. A failure to moderate is a failure to ensure decent education. This is the very thing that separates a university from an open mic night at your local pub. Remove this moderation and you make the university completely obsolete, beyond it being a certificate mill. So what we are in fact discussing with no platforms is a moral obligation in providing the agreed service paid for by the students. Oh yeah, that's a part that's almost always left out. The spaces and resources these external speakers demand, they're paid for by the students. That's why said students have more than a mere right to air their protest. It's their right to say, I'd like to know and I'd like to be able to inform what the money is going on to ensure the quality of my education. Fact is, the analogy I just gave for both car and diff are pretty similar to what happened at Cardiff University in 2015. Germaine Greer was set to give a talk at the university when LGBT+ activists called her out on her continued transphobic narrative in hopes that the university would cancel the event. However, unlike the analogy, the university ultimately decided to host the event anyway. But if they hadn't, they still would not have violated her freedom of speech, as has hopefully been demonstrated. So what about the moral academic obligation? Well, this is where the grey area seeps in. Unlike freedom of speech, which is a black and white scenario, obligation is not so clear. Almost everyone agrees that there are talks no longer worth having on campuses, such as whether the Earth is 6,000 years old, does the sun rotate around the Earth, or whether slavery is socially justifiable. Most people agree on these things and would never demand universities use their resources to promote these topics. The problem here is that some people believe that the question as to whether lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and all other sexualities and gender variants exist should be included on that list, whilst others do not. Apparently to some people, my very existence is an anomaly which can be denied, even as you listen and watch me speaking. So I am part of the camp that believes questioning the existence of LGBT+ individuals is a conversation that sort of needs to die off, at least until there's greater evidence to justify further discussion than simple denial, which I believe is as likely to occur as evidence that the universe is 6,000 years old. But is that to say no platforming cannot be abused to stifle freedom of speech? Not at all. No platforming is a tool, and like all tools, it can be abused. No platforming on its own is not an issue, but as part of a greater silencing campaign, it becomes a symptom of a deeper issue. Take the case of Maryam Namazie, ex-Muslim and social rights activist. In 2015, she faced numerous attempts to no-platform her talks about her experience as an apostate and the experiences she has recorded throughout her work. Fact is, the no-platforming she faced was simply a small part of the issue, which involved attempts to stop the talk from going ahead once it had been green-lighted by the university, and even threaten her and other apostates attending with physical harm if she continued to talk. To place Greer and Namazie in the same circle would be an insult to the mountain Namazie has had to climb. Whilst Greer is a well-off upper-class white woman who can harness national and even international media coverage to insult students for breaching her human rights on freedom of speech when she feels smarted, Maryam Namazie faces the threat of radical violence for every single word she says. This is also why when Greer silenced paying attendees to her Cardiff talk during the open Q&A on the basis that they were trans, nobody raised their voice for those individuals. Greer has power that both Namazie and the trans segment of the LGBT+ community do not. And that, if you are wondering, is why the trans community and the trans-inclusive feminism and LGBT plus activism felt betrayed by the actions of Peter Tatchell to support forcing students to foot the bill for the continued denial of LGBT plus individuals and their existence, not for supporting Greer's right to say what she wishes to say, but forcing universities to host said talk. I have a microphone, I have a channel, I have a platform, and I do not have to let the Germaine Greers, the Ray Comforts and the Vanny Harrys of the world use it or stand trial in court for a breach of human rights, i.e. freedom of speech. It's just ludicrous to suggest. The attempt to portray this as a human rights violation is one designed to polarize discussion and, ironically, one to stifle debate. We're not going to talk about this. It's a clear violation of human rights, and the new liberals who say otherwise or question me have betrayed everything to our cause. Are you a traitor? It's the exact same speak as the Cold War and post 9/11 narrative. You're either with us or against us. But as you now hopefully know, me not giving you my resources is not denying you your ability to speak or silencing you. It's this very narrative that has allowed creationism to sneak back into the classroom under the guise of teaching the alternative. Otherwise, you are violating my freedom of speech. No. The age of the earth being 6,000 years old is not substantive enough to teach in an educational environment, and neither is the dangers of autism causing vaccines or the non-existence of LGBT plus individuals. You get to have your own opinion. You do not get to have your own facts, and you certainly do not get to teach said facts at an educational establishment. Want to change things? Prove your point. Keep piling up the evidence until it becomes undeniable, and then we can have this talk. Not when it is simply your opinion that LGBT plus individuals do not exist, or that the earth is 6,000 years old, or that the sun rotates around us. Make a discussion worth having. Don't simply demand it on the basis that you have a differing opinion. But the thing that I want to be taken from this video the most is that we need to stop pretending that no platforming is a human rights violation. This does a severe disservice to people who actually face systems of oppression, whether they be ones stooped in bureaucratic legality like Russia or violence like fundamentalistic Islam. If you want to argue that Speaker X is worth having, then fine, but don't warp the situation for a cheap win. It doesn't impress anybody. All it does is show us that you don't truly care about human rights. If you did, you would not be so quick to cheapen them. Let's give one last analogy, just to hit home. If you view no platforming, the withdrawal or non-allowance of my resources to spread your opinion, as a violation of freedom of speech, you have destroyed the scientific community. Peer-reviewed academic journals cannot exist. Why? Because they have the qualifier of peer review, and if you have that qualifier, not every opinion is going to match those standards. And if not every opinion matches those standards, and you withhold your resources and your platform of the journal, you are violating their freedom of speech. Well done. If you believe no platforming is human rights violations, you cannot agree with peer-reviewed journals, universities at all, television, radio, nothing, because they moderate who can talk on it and who can't. Not any random person can demand to have 24/7 airtime on the BBC. Is that a freedom of speech violation? If so, why is it different for universities and not these cases? If I had a journal, creation area, I had printing press, because I still printed my journal or whatever, and I sold all of that, and I purchased a room with a stage, and I was doing talks, like TED Talks now. And I kept the same system of peer review that I had for the journal. Would I then be violating freedom of speech if I hadn't beforehand? Can you explain the difference there? What changed? Would it be changed if I classed it as a university? Explain the difference. Why is it violation of freedom of speech for one and not the other? Because you really need to clarify that before you continue. So thank you all for listening. This is Essence of Thought. Take care and out.